you can use the power of the social media through your multimedia system in your church or in your house or in your organization to reach the largest number of people with the gospel and with whatever news you want to give to them. And helping us today is my dear brother and friend, Pastor Ayobami OLUNLOYO, the head of multimedia for Jesus House London, RCCG Jesus House London. More of him will be given to us by the panel of interviewers. I just want to say welcome and thanks once again, Pastor Ayobami. God bless you. Thank you for joining us. And I want to pray that we will all be blessed, at this conference again this afternoon. God bless you. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, once again, we want to say thank you for the privilege, oh Lord God Almighty, to put this conference on the air. Thank you, Daddy, for all your children who have been working tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure that our post-COVID conferences are successful. Thank you for all our listeners, everyone joining from all over the world. And we are thank you because you know that many have been blessed and will still be blessed. Once again, we declare today's conference open in the name of God the Father, and of God the Son, and of God the Holy Spirit. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for in Jesus' mighty name we have prayed. Once again, Pastor OLUNLOYO, you are welcome, sir. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Pastor. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome once again to the fourth episode of our post-COVID series. Today we'll be discussing the topic, Digital Church, creating an online presence for your ministry. And we are privileged to have in our midst today Pastor Ayobami OLUNLOYO, who is an expert and thought leader in the field, to discuss the topic with us. So a brief introduction of Pastor Ayobami. So Pastor Ayobami OLUNLOYO is a renowned technical and multimedia consultant who is currently the managing and technical director at Power Media Limited. He's also the multimedia production manager for Jesus House London, where he is also an ordained pastor. And he's also a technical production manager at the Festival of Life, Europe's largest all-night prayer gathering, where we host up to about 40,000 people at each event. So just a bit of a background into his academic series. So I'm just trying to get the, okay. So Pastor Ayobami is a graduate of University of Cambridge, where he holds an MBA, and also a graduate of University of Birmingham, where he studied electronics engineering and management, and is a thought leader, like I said earlier, and an expert. And today he's going to be discussing the topic with us, and we are very privileged to have him around. Pastor Ayobami, once again, you're welcome, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Osaje. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And also to Pastor Tokunbo Ibikunle, someone who is my elder in the faith and in age and in many things, but who has always treated me with such great honor and respect. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. It's an honor to be with you all. Thank you.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. And yes, so just going straight to the topic, because we have just 1 hour, we would like you to basically take us to the basics, Digital Church 101, the way I would put it. So just to ask, what is a digital church and what makes it different from the regular church that we've been used to for a very long time?
Brilliant. Thank you for that. I think that's a very interesting question. The question is, what is a digital church? And along the way, I believe I'm going to have to rephrase that question, if you don't mind, because
sure.
in my answer.
Okay.
But it helps to explain the point I want to make. So when we say what is a digital church, it almost makes you think the church is digital. But in a sense, in reality, what we're really saying is that what is it to do church digitally, if that makes sense. And the reason I say that is because the whole point and essence of the church, that has never changed. The church is the church. So it's not so much that the church is digital, but the church is what it has always been, the ecclesia, the gathering of people, who are the congregation who worship God. So, the Great Commission is where I always go to when I'm asked similar questions to this, where Jesus asks us as disciples to go out and preach the gospel to all nations. And I think that's important to remember. So that's what the church is. So the digital church, what we must be careful to continue to do is to separate the means from the end. The end has always been the church and is still the church. The means might be using digital technologies to achieve that purpose. So sometimes those two things could be confused, but it's important to retain clarity that what has never changed is the message of Christ and it's the message of the church. What we might change is how we deliver that message. And in this context, we're talking about using digital technologies. So in a sense, so technology is a means of bringing the experience of church to people. It isn't in itself the church. And sometimes, as I said, those things can get confused. So more accurately, I think what we're really talking about is church digitized, the experience of church digitized, and how, what does that mean, and how can we do that? As I said, the word ecclesia, the original Greek word, meaning congregation or gathering, and so on, is the reference I go back to here. So, having this in mind and keeping in mind that the assembly of the brethren is a very core part of what the church is. I think going back to your original question, which is what's the difference between a digital church and maybe church as we knew it, is simply the fact that church is church, but using and adapting technologies of the digital nature to, bring that experience to people is what I think the term digital church refers to, not so much the fact that something technical is happening in the air around the idea of church, if that makes sense. Yeah. But we'll expand on that because I think the answer grows as we discuss more.
Thank you so much for that. And why is it important for churches to have a digital or online presence in our present world?
No, I think one of the things that's most important is that there are trends with technology that happen over the ages, and life as a whole respects those trends. So once upon a time, TV, radio were some of the broadcast technologies of the day. There was nothing else. These were the things at the top. Options now include, via the internet, many platforms, the Instagrams, the Facebooks, the YouTubes, and things like that. But my point is, with these trends as they go along, I feel that the church should never just follow trends for the sake of it, but must be aware of the tools and the solutions that such trends create. Now, I think the business of church is the business of people. And at the end of the day, the church, if you think about the church as a business, then we have customers. And our customers are people. If we're selling something, we need to sell it to the customers in a way that they want it and sell something they want to buy.
True.
If the customers don't want to buy what you're selling, then as a business, you're going to fail. So when you ask me why is it important for churches to have, how did you put it?
To have an online presence, yes.
An online presence. It's because that's what the customer of the day wants. That's what the customer of the day needs. That's how the customer of the day is being communicated with. That's what the customer of the day is used to. And if we don't get into that space and communicate with that customer with our message that has never changed and never will change, but in a new way of propagating that message, then we frankly face the prospect of annihilation and just not being relevant. So I think it's important that the message is encapsulated and wrapped in the right means to be able to be delivered to the customer. Yeah.
Thank you.
And as you know, the customer is the entire world.
Actually, yeah, that's very true. Because Jesus said that we should go. He says, "Go ye into all the world and make disciples of all nations." So,
Absolutely.
yeah, well, one of the things that we used to think I mean, like, growing up as Christians, how are we going to do this? There are lots of nations in the world that have very strict regulations about who can come in, what you can do, and we just keep thinking, how is it going to be possible for this gospel to reach the world? But yeah, based on your explanation, it's easy to see how we can actually reach the nooks and crannies of the world with the gospel of Jesus. And I know that you're experienced in the field as a digital media consultant, and I know you've worked with organizations and you also work with a church as well. Just based on your experience, what challenges would you say churches mostly face with being able to create an online presence?
I think that's a very, very interesting question. I think in terms of challenges, in fact, I love the question, Osaje. Thank you. You see, the thing about challenges is that sometimes challenges are real, and sometimes they're perceived. Some challenges are made to be bigger than they are, and some are, in fact, what they are. They are a real challenge. And the reason I say all that is because within the churches, what I have found with, a few years of talking to different organizations and seeing what they're doing and what they want to do, is that I consider two things as myths. Two myths that churches do they propagate them? Yeah, maybe they do propagate them because they believe them and then they build on them. And it's the myth that one of cost and one of equipment. So these are some of the challenges I come across. So a lot of churches being non-profit organizations, they're always looking to save cost and to minimize cost, which is understandable. But what that does is that it holds back innovation. It holds back the ability to actually create solutions that are viable. Now, the reason why I think cost is a myth is because a lot of solutions in this digital era for propagating the gospel using technologies of this nature are negligible. They don't have to be significant costs. There are things that can be done. There are tools that are absolutely free that other organizations have made and made available that non-profit organizations, including churches, can use to actually benefit their mission. So that's one thing. The other one is this idea that equipment, you need some massive haul of equipment to be able to do what is pretty straightforward, Of course, it can get complex. Technical things do get complex, with bigger, more involved solutions. But not everybody is in the state where they need such solutions. And in the average, most common state of organizations in the sector, I think it isn't that big a deal to be able to find appropriate equipment to deliver the solutions that are necessary. So I feel that these two things are perceived challenges. They are not really, in my opinion, as big as they are purported to be as challenges. So I think that's one important thing. I mean, there's a mantra that I hold. It comes from Exodus 4:2, where God asked Moses, "What is in your hand?" And I use that to basically explain the fact that there's a lot of solutions. There are a lot of solutions and tools within the normal everyday life that can actually contribute to this digital era of propagating the gospel. And I think it's important to look in-house and to see what is available to be able to use that, to be able to actually propagate the message. We use social media all the time, personally. We use our own Instagram accounts, our own Facebook accounts, and so on and so forth. It is not a long stretch to be able to extend that, to be able to use those things in a corporate sense for the work of the ministry. And I think it's important to be able to use that in that manner. So for me, three things that I find as the challenges. One more is people, trained personnel, people who are equipped, capable, and ready to do what needs to be done. So I think these three things, people, funding, and tools, these are some of the challenges I have, but I feel that they're all easily addressed. To train people up and to develop them in the capability to use the systems, to find systems that are viable and not, cost, how do you say it? Cost, yes, cost, they're not inhibited by cost, things like that. And then finally also funding. things are not as expensive as people believe them to be. So I think it's important that we break these myths and realize that these things are surmountable. Yeah.
Thank you. You addressed part of the next question I was going to get to, because one of the myths is cost. I think one common question that churches will tend to ask these days is, who should we be consulting? What do we need to actually set this up? And how much money are we going to be required to invest into this in order to get a digital or online presence? And I think you've addressed that part of it. But I just want to ask, what, based on your expertise, what is the minimum cost required to actually set up a digital church, an online presence for a church?
Well, that is a very interesting question, Osaje, and it's a question I would expect to be asked by many churches. But it happens because of the great work that many organizations have done ahead of us. It happens to be a very easy question. So if you asked me what would be the cost of a typical project in a specific church, that would be a difficult question, because it depends on what that church wants to do, what they already have, what their vision is, how far they're projecting forward, and so on. But what you did ask is, what's the minimum cost to set up a venture of this nature? And the reason why that question is easy is because that cost is zero. It's absolutely nil. Nothing. Nothing, because of what you already potentially have. So if where you are is that you have a home with internet already, and you already own a laptop, then your cost literally, Osaje, is zero. Because all you've got to do is register a Facebook account. What does that cost you?
£0.
Okay. Register a YouTube account. What does that cost you?
Zero.
Register an Instagram account. What does that cost you?
Absolutely free.
You might be paying BT for your internet, but you were already paying that before you decided to go digital, right?
True.
So that cost is still zero. The laptop you're going to use, you already owned it.
Yeah.
Cost is what?
Zero. Yeah.
So with these accounts registered, the laptop you have and the internet you already have, how much does it cost us to get online?
£0. Zero.
Absolutely nil. If you asked me if it was a church of 50 people in a certain location doing a certain thing, and they want to be able to sing and this, we can then start talking about, what that means. How do we get that music into the system? How can we make sure that music is clean? Are we editing anything? If we are, what software are we using? Who's going to be doing that editing? Personnel costs, software costs, things like that. Yes, it can grow. But if you're starting minimum and you just want to get out there, it literally costs you nothing.
Thank you. So yeah, you heard the expert. So it doesn't cost you anything to set up an online church, whether you are in the UK, US, Nigeria. It's one thing that is consistent with the currency when it comes to amount is zero. So it's £0, £0, 0 cedis, 0 rands. That's all you need to set up an online church.
This is the time when the exchange rate is the same, yeah? This is the only time.
Exactly.
When the cost is zero. 0 times anything is zero.
It's zero, exactly.
Whatever the rate.
So brilliant. So yeah, if you're still wondering what you need to do to set up an online church, he's made a very valid point today to say, essentially, if you have a phone, if you have access to the internet, that's all you need to set up an online church. So what advice would you give to any church that may still be facing the challenges of where maybe, there are churches that really do not have all these technical skills. Maybe they're just setting up, and because of the current situation in the world, they have to go online. They may not have all the skills, like maybe a multimedia team and all the facilities to run this. What advice would you give to them in order to keep providing the spiritual needs for their members?
Okay, I love that question, and thank you for asking that. Also because I hope it will be relevant in my response to people in a very practical sense. So I think my biggest, and probably if I was to give one piece of advice, Osaje, it would be Start. Just start. You know why? You know the Bible says in Zechariah 4:10, right? It is Zechariah 4:10. It says, don't despise the days of small beginnings. Yeah? The reason why this would be my one piece of advice is because when you start, you build knowledge, you build experience, and you build expertise.
True.
You may be starting from a place where you're learning.
Yeah.
But you know, when we talk about people have experience, when you go to someone's CV and someone's job, what's it called, or even a job description, when they ask for somebody who's, you're looking for a job and there's a job description, they say you have 7 years experience, 10 years experience. Yeah. That's what they want. Yeah. What is that experience? That experience is a counter that began the day you started in that field.
True. Or
you started doing whatever that thing is. So 7 years ago, if you have 7 years of experience, you knew nothing on day one.
Yeah.
On day two, you knew a little bit more. By year one, you knew a bit. And then by year 7, which is today, you say you have 7 years experience.
Yeah.
But if you didn't start 7 years ago, you'd have no experience in that field.
True.
So what do I mean by start? I mean begin something. We've talked about just a few minutes ago about ways you can begin. And I just want to reiterate that. That's like the most fundamental, basic way to start. Yeah?
Yeah.
But even with that, obviously there are more sophisticated things you can do. But even with that, you have started.
Yeah.
Now, what you begin to do is to gain that experience. Is that you learn from your mistakes. You understand ways to do it. More importantly, you might even understand ways not to do it. But all that happens because you started.
Yeah.
You gain expertise. But some other valuable, sort of offshoots of starting is the fact that people will learn along the way. Yeah? That's always what experience is about. And then some may see what you're doing, and some people may see what you're doing and decide to fund it or to donate to it.
Yeah.
So that thing that stopped you from starting, which is, we don't have the funding, we don't have the money, we can't. It may be the starting that actually gets somebody to say, you know what, I see what they're trying to do there. I see what they're doing there. Let's contribute to that. True. And people may contribute time, they may contribute talent, they may contribute treasure, they may fund it. But it's only because you started. Yeah? Additionally, as I said just now, people may learn their expertise if they see that there's something there. And then, of course, what you might also do is that you might arouse curiosity and interest from people who don't know that you are going to do this. They weren't part of the thing, the vision and all that, but they see you doing something and they think, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Let me get in there. But if you didn't start, that person may just be sitting there doing nothing. So long story short, a lot of all these things wouldn't happen if you didn't start. So my one piece of advice is not something technical, get this or buy that or invest in this, invest in that, or something creative or, do this software, create this video. No, I think it's really simply just to start something, because in that, there is so much more that can expand and explode, that can grow the whole thing and create far more impact than any singular thing that you could do, whether in the creative or technical sense. Yeah.
So start. I think that's a very vital point, because the more we delay and the more we procrastinate, we tend to see that we lose interest, and that could actually lead to discouragement as well. But with starting, I think curiosity actually is one of the key things that drives invention. Okay, we don't know what to do, but we want to do something, so we begin to ask questions, and by asking questions, we begin to get answers, and from answers, we get direction. Eventually, it becomes something very massive, and yeah, so I think it's very, very key what you've said, that it's important for churches to start. And I'm just wondering, one of the things, one of the areas people tend to get answers is also maybe going online, looking out for resources available or experts around. So for churches within the UK, do you know, or not just the UK, because we're talking about church globally, do you know of any useful resources or where people can actually go to get answers if, for example, they are stuck and they don't really know what next to be doing? Do you know? Because it might be difficult to reach out to an individual, or people may be very busy. Do you know of any recommended platforms or resources that people can actually get to get answers if they have questions around this stuff?
Yeah, thank you for that. Is this particularly about digital church, digitizing, setting up a system for broadcast, that sort of thing?
Yes.
Or do you just mean general media technologies for church?
Basically setting up an online church.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things I would encourage as church organizations is that we build relationships. I think that's very important. Frankly, that's what you guys are doing right now, with Jesus House, with me, and and so on. And many people on this watching or listening to this broadcast may not realize that we began a relationship many years ago. I remember coming to your church on the invitation of a very dear brother, friend of mine, Pastor Shegun Fatoye, and also Pastor Ibukule, to come and do some work with your media team. Maybe, many years later, that's what has led to this opportunity today. But my point is that there's a relationship. It's a relationship that's important to me. It's one that I cherish and very much appreciate. But what that relationship does is that, as the Bible says, iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
I have never been, and I do not believe I will ever be in a position, ever, no matter what I'm doing, wherever I am, that I will have learned it all, I will have known it all, and there's nobody one can learn from. I never envisaged such a time. So I say that to mean that I am learning from this experience and from the exchange that I'm having with your church. And as much as I hope that you are learning from my experience, and that's that word again, experience. My experience is different from yours. So what I mean by that is that we can always exchange, we can always share. Now, where did I start? I said build relationships. So for example, I am always looking for churches that are doing things that I aspire to as a media team, that we aspire to as a media team within a church organization. And who do we aspire to? Many churches around the world are doing fantastic things in media, not just in social media, but more in the technical media solutions, within the physical building and also externally. So I would encourage us to go out and, literally write an email to somebody, call whoever that you think they're doing great stuff, wherever they may be. They may be in the US, they may be in Australia, they may be wherever they are. Say that I am the media director of so-and-so church in Nottingham, in London, in this. We've been doing this, and we see that you guys have been doing that. And we really love what you're doing. Would love to learn more about that. Do you have a moment where we could chat? And in this day where everybody is on Zoom, I would not be surprised at all that somebody will respond to you and say, listen, yeah, we're very busy, but, would love to chat with you, when we have some downtime and all that. Now, that's the first place that I would recommend, and there are many churches here in London, even in the UK, that we can reach out to gain such relationships. But beyond that, yes, I know that there are a lot of software solutions out there. I always recommend the Church Online platform, which is made by Life Church. Life Church in the US is Craig Rochelle. His church is the same church that creates the YouVersion app, if you're familiar with that. Yeah, and the YouVersion for kids, the Bible app, and so on. So they created the Church Online platform. The Church Online platform is a platform, a web platform, through which churches can create a digital online ministry. Now, with it, there are a lot of tutorials, there are a lot of videos about the essence of the platform, what it does, how it achieves what it does. They've just moved to version 4, and so they've released videos around that. So there is a lot of material of that nature out there already. There are other software companies that we're familiar with, places like Renewed Vision. I believe Renewed Vision is the company that makes ProPresenter. ProPresenter is a software that a lot of churches use for graphic displays in church. So Renewed Vision has a particular focus on churches, and they've created and developed technologies that work a lot for houses of worship. So these are companies that we tend to use their software, we tend to use their products, but we don't engage with them beyond that. And I'm saying that there is the opportunity to engage with them. Now, I've had the privilege, by God's grace, to be at trade shows in the US, here in the UK, where companies like Renewed Vision have been exhibitors, and you can literally walk up to them and see, these are the guys that made Pro Presenter. Wow. And you can talk to them, and you can influence the product. You can tell them that this is the experience you had in the field, and say, wouldn't it be nice if the software was able to do this? And they may consider that and go back and write that into the code because of your feedback. So I'm just saying that rather than, and I'm not saying people do this, but there's a tendency to stay with what we have, stay with what we know, and try to make the best of it. And I think my advice is let's reach out. Look, a lot of software we use, it says about this software. We never really read those things. Who goes there to read what that is? Nobody reads that.
Yeah.
But read it. Read the phone number that is there. Read the person who says, and write that person an email and say, listen, I saw, you guys were behind Presentation Manager, PowerPoint, whatever, and say, we'd love it to be able to do this. What do you think? And back specifically to online digital presence. When we start to talk about the creative side of it, for example, what you put on your online church, videos and things, there are a lot of platforms that do support for things like that as well. Free downloads, videos, motion graphics, things like that. Igniter Media, for example, in the US, places like that, who are specifically Christian content that they create. Worship videos, bumper videos, intro to service, things like that that you can use. Ready-made stuff. You can just add your own stuff to it. And in some cases, you don't even have to add anything. It's ready for you. So even that creative element that you need people for, there are places where you can get content like that and use them ready-made. So what it takes to really start is really not that big a deal.
Thank you. So I think the key point there is reach out and do a whole lot more research. The answers are just around us. We may not realize it, but they are there. And thank you very much for giving that answer. If you're watching from home and you have any questions, please feel free to put your questions on the chat. And hopefully we'd have enough time to be able to ask Pastor Ayobami to help us address those questions. Speaking of questions, Pastor Ayobami, we have 2 questions from our audience online. So one of the questions says, but how do you create good user experience online? I believe that's when you have a digital, an online church. How do you create a good experience online?
That is an amazing question. Thank you to the person who asked that, because I think it goes to the core of what it is that we started with, this whole idea of digital church, which we're sort of rephrasing to be church digitalized. And I think the point, the word experience is the core of the whole thing. Because think about it. If I were Netflix, right? And we are church A or church B or whatever church, and we had enough influence over Netflix, whether that be because our content production quality-wise is very high quality, high enough for Netflix, or whether or not we have enough money to pay Netflix to put our content on, or whatever else, whatever influence we exert over them. Imagine we're a church and we're able to put our content on Netflix. Does that mean that whatever we put on Netflix, people can just go there in the same way they're watching, I don't know, whatever show, they're watching our service or our event or whatever, is that church? Would that have been the experience of church? And I think for me, that goes to the heart of this question. Because the experience is much more than watching content. I think that's the point I'm trying to make. Watching content, you can do that on almost any platform, Amazon Prime, Netflix, all these sort of platforms, Disney Plus and so on, Apple TV. But this is not the whole point of church. Church has with it the experience, and that's where the fellowship, the discipleship, the growth, the ability to mutually lean on each other as Christians. And I think that's one of the core things of the experience. Yeah. So one of the things we do with our church online is that there is a host team that are involved in the engagement side of the infrastructure of online church. And so the media team does the job of producing the content and streaming live and so on. But the host team has the job of engaging the audience, the congregation, with the deeper essence of the experience. you know, encouraging people with the scriptures, with the word, sharing with them information that is pertinent and important at that point in the service, answering questions they may have, and ensuring that that experience isn't just one where people are watching. Of course, making sure that what they're doing is not a distraction, making sure that it isn't so much chatting going on that people cannot actually focus on the experience of worship or hearing the message and so on and so forth. But I think those additions to what it is that is essentially a video broadcast from your organization are very important. And I think they go to the heart of what it is to have an experience of church. I think if the communication is one way, then it limits the experience. When people can feedback in terms of what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, and even if they're not necessarily saying that to you, but they're just expressing it, and it causes that feeling of, you know, being excited to be in God's presence. And I think allowing, you know, an opportunity for that to happen within your experience of online church, I think is critical. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I think what I picked from what you've just said is the ability not just to dish out content to the church. Say, for example, just preach a 30-minute sermon or just show them everything you do in church, but being able to connect with them as well, responding to questions, creating engagement. And I think, yeah, that's a very good point that would keep people coming rather than just sitting down. If you sit down and just watch an event, things could happen, especially when you're online. Lots of distractions are online, and yeah, I think it's important to keep the people that are watching online, watching our online service engaged. I've got another question. I think.
Osaje, can I just add very quickly to that point?
Yes,
just
please.
A little point.
Thank you.
The other thing is that we must differentiate ourselves from what you might describe as imitators. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what takes our time in this whole social engagement arena? Going to church must be different from watching Netflix. Yeah? Because Netflix gives you something. That something is entertainment. You enjoy it. You're not necessarily talking to anybody. I know there are Netflix watch parties now where people come together to watch a show or something. But my point is that when you go to church, what a church must do is that it must disciple you. You must grow as a result. You must be a different person. You must be improved at the end of the experience. If all you were is entertained, then that's not church. And I think that differentiation is what must be clear in terms of whatever we give out in terms of church organizations. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
So another person has asked the question. The question is, if the cost is zero, why are people spending a whole lot of money on their digital platforms?
So first of all, let's just be clear. The cost is not always zero. The question at the time was, what's the minimal cost? And the minimum cost is indeed zero. But as I say, different organizations have different needs. And there are organizations that are much smaller. And I'm not saying that it's only the family pastor and father, mother, kids, and neighbors that requires zero cost. There are minimal sized organizations that can also go at zero cost because they already have this, they already have that, laptop, internet, and so on. But when you get to a certain point, you're a church of 50, you're a church of 100, you want to start doing certain things, like you want to schedule things to happen automatically. You want to add worship in a sophisticated manner. You have people in multiple locations. You want to have response chat functionality and things like that. Even that doesn't cost, depending on what you use, because you can chat on Facebook or you can chat on YouTube and cost you nothing. But things can get more technical, more sophisticated.
Yeah.
So in that regard, then of course there is a cost, and those costs can ramp up. But the question is also a very good one from that audience member, because it goes to the heart of something else, because the question says, you know, so why then, I believe it said, why then the people not do it, or something like that.
Why do they spend a lot of money on...
Why do they spend a lot of people, a lot of money? Yeah, again, because of what I said earlier, because I think some of these things are myths. There are people who run businesses out there. People, you know, if you come to me and say you want to buy this, I'm going to sell it to you. But that's a different question from what do I need? And if I'm going to be honest to answer the what do I need question, it may not be what I'm selling. It may be something else that is not what I'm selling. But what's the point of my business if I'm not selling anything? So of course, if I go and say I need this, people are going to sell you what you say you want. Now, a lot of people as well follow trends. A lot of churches follow trends. We see somebody doing something, let's be honest, let's be frank. No, we want that too. We want to do that as well. So we don't start from what do we need. We start from what are they doing, and let's do it too. And of course, immediately you're spending money.
Yeah.
You're spending money from day one because you're trying to do what somebody else is doing, not what you need. Or, you know, so those are some, I mean, the question, if the question is at the heart of why are people spending money, then I think those are some of the reasons. But of course, some people are spending money genuinely because they have done their own research, they have their own vision, they've determined what they want to do, and they've created a roadmap from where they are to where they want to get to. And they see that that roadmap is only going to be made real by investing in certain things, certain people, and certain timelines to be able to achieve that. Then, of course, yes, they have to spend money to get there. But that's not the same for everybody.
Yeah, thank you. So the minimum cost to set up an online church itself is £0, based on what Pastor Ayobami said. But as the needs of the church increase, you may need to get sophisticated as well. So this is where we have experts like Pastor Ayobami and his media company called PAV, and we also have Voxnet Solutions. That's why we have this organizations available to actually provide the extra support that the church would need. But yeah, what you need to start is what you already have, essentially. Like you said, if you already have a mobile phone or a laptop and access to the internet, that's all you need. So Pastor Ayobami, I'm just going to ask one more question, but before then, also I have my next question. Before I go to my next question, I just want to encourage anyone listening from home, please you can ask your questions on slido.com. You can see it on the screen as just below the screen. The information on how to log in and ask your question is on there. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So yeah, coming back to the digital church and creating an online presence, Pastor Ayobami, you see, as it applies in the business world, if a business has a product or a service it wants to sell to the target audience, one thing that is important is that they must be able to afford it, right? And they must be able to access it at the same time. Now, we know that based on the current situation, the church is basically forced to actually create an online presence, be online where most people can, or the members and anyone who is interested can actually work. But my question is around churches that are in parts of the world that are not as technologically advanced as places like the US, the UK, generally the Western world. What advice would you give? Because thinking about it, internet is already available in a place like the UK. The technology is available as well. But in places like Nigeria, for example, we still have internet being very expensive and also capped at a particular limit. So, for example, I worked at a telecoms company once, and I know if you buy internet, you pay a certain amount to get, say, for example, 500 MB. Now, if your church holds like 4 times a month, you expect people to join your live service. They may not be able to afford that, and especially where the larger congregation is comprises of people of low and middle income earners. So what advice would you be given to such churches to keep their members fed with their spiritual needs and being able to access the services?
Thank you for that question, Osaje. I think it's probably one of the best questions you've asked so far, because I think the majority of our audience in countries like the ones you described will be in that situation. They potentially will have a cost inhibitive situation to be able to access technologies of this nature and so on. So I think it's a really relevant question. And my response to it is along the lines of the fact that technology is not transient. We think sometimes that it is. Do you remember all these movies that we watch where something is happening, it's modern day, and maybe there's an earthquake or something major has happened, and the actors have to do this thing where they go back into some old technology. That's the only thing that saves them, because everything modern, internet has gone down, this has gone down, everything modern has gone down. They have to. I remember a movie, San Andreas. I don't know if you've seen it. San Andreas is the San Andreas fault in the U.S. is, it's in California, I think. Basically the tectonic plates, they shift, major earthquake, and everything happens, and these kids are trying to connect with their dad, and they end up using a landline, something like that. They connected together. No mobile phones were working, masks were down and all that, to reach out, and they were able to connect. My point is that there are technologies that have been, but remember I talked earlier, Sajay, about trends. What makes those technologies obsolete is not the fact that they no longer work. It's the fact that the trends have moved on. Something better has been made. Technology has been improved. And therefore, we stop using cassettes and we move to CD. Then we stop using CD, and then we move on to audio files, MP3, and then MP3 players are born, and then the iPod is born, and so on and so forth. That's what happens. The tapes stop working. If we kept using them and kept making them and kept maintaining them, the tape machine stopped working? No, it had limitations compared to CD, yeah, but it never stopped working. So much so that if you go to the right place, you can still find a tape recorder today. You can still find VHS players, and so on and so forth. Why do I say all this? I say technology is not transient because it's important to remember that it's always about the customer. The question is that what advice will I give to churches to be able to continue to reach their members adequately, where they cannot, in a sense, where they cannot access the technology of the day because it's cost prohibitive or anything like that. The point is that we must go back to what I refer to as go back to first principles. Look at the customer. If we are focusing on church, not the digital side, we're focusing on what it is to do church, not to what it is to do digital, then it must be the customer that dictates that. It must be how the customer can receive church. That is what we focus on, not how the customer can receive digital.
Good point.
Does this make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Now, how the customer can receive church is the fact that that's why I love organizations like Premier Christian Radio. Why do I say that? Because that's an organization that understands its vision and sticks to it. It has a DNA. Premier Christian Radio has not said everything is Instagram now, so we're not doing radio anymore, so we're going to Facebook now. We're going to this or that now. They may have a Facebook page, their link may be there, you click on it, but it's still essentially a radio station. So guess what? If and when Instagram stops working, Zoom stopped working a few weeks ago, if you remember.
Yes.
So in case we think these things are not possible, Zoom crashed, the whole thing, I don't know if it's the whole thing, but there was a worldwide system glitch with Zoom. That can happen with anything. Now, guess what's going to be stable? Most likely, the radio stations, maybe TV as well. You remember that when we went, TV was the mainstream thing and radio was mainstream. Did church become TV only? Because the question is not whether or not we are going to become all internet-based. The question is, what can we do to continue to feed our people? So I think reverting to first principles is important. Finding the best ways. Sometimes, Osaje, maybe flyers. It may be written notes. It may be whatever it takes to get the gospel out. And sometimes that's not this digital thing in worlds that you've explained in terms of places where access to some of these tools may be prohibitive. So I think it's important to remember that, as I said, that technology is not transient. There's an opportunity to go back to technologies that have worked. Of course, I'm not saying everybody should start duplicating tapes again, but there are still radio stations. There are still broadcasts you can do. If you have to put a thing on the roof of your car, a speaker on the roof of your car and drive around neighborhoods, if that's allowed wherever you are, to just share this gospel, or create congregations of people where you can come together. And let's not forget, there's a purpose for missionaries. Yeah? So I think it's important that we remember that we have to feed the people how they need and can be fed, rather than trying to push down digital technology down the throats of people if it's not appropriate. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very good point, because like you rightly mentioned earlier, it's not about just going with the trend. It's about understanding the needs of your church, understanding the needs of your members, and giving them what they need in the way that they can receive it. And I think that is very, very vital. And thank you so much for that answer. So we've got about 9 more minutes. We've got 3 questions coming from listeners online. So I'm just going to go through their questions and see if we can answer one more question from what we already have. So the first question is, for the church, being online is important, but how do you monitor feedback in terms of impact of the church message, or is the number of logons enough?
It's a good question, and I'll try to answer quickly so we can take a few more before we end.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important to look at all metrics. So first of all, we don't always do a great job of capturing data, and I think it's important to do that. So some of that data is, yes, how many people actually accessed your platform, log on metrics and things like that. But as you know, the people that log on may be logging on multiple times, and also maybe logging on from multiple devices. So it doesn't necessarily translate to the actual number of people that came to your service, but it gives you some sort of ideas. So I think that's one metric. I think there are verbal metrics as well. So, actually go out and collect feedback. So if you get people to register on your platform, if that is possible, and this is where certain things now start to come back to that question of cost. If your platform is YouTube and maybe people just come in a very generic way and they don't register, it's just a generic platform, then you may want to get something that is less generic where they can register. If you have people registered, then that means you can contact them legitimately, GDPR and all things considered, data protection and all that. But you can contact them, you can send them surveys, you can ask them what they think, what they thought about the service, and so on and so forth. People can give you feedback in that way. So I think, without going too long, so we can take a few more questions. Those are some of the ideas. Other metrics, that you can capture as well, include, you can put services on at different times and see who logged on, how many people logged on, late services, early services, midday services, that sort of thing. And then see, what people like to respond to. So you can just be a little bit intelligent about, how we put our services out, do a bit of A/B testing, see, how people respond to that. Yeah. And in the process, we glean a lot of information back in terms of how people are feeling. And as I said, just plainly go out there and ask them, what do you guys feel? How do you feel? But to do that, you have to have them registered. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and another question is, for a small starting up church, where it's a personal laptop and a home Wi-Fi helping create the online presence, what bandwidth would you use? So do you want me to go over the question again, sir?
No, it's fine. I heard you. I wasn't sure you'd finished. Yeah.
Oh,
so
okay.
What bandwidth?
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know. So test it. What are we using right now? You guys told me something. What was it that Femi told me? 2 megabits. I can't remember what it was. But the reason I say that is because I wouldn't worry about that. If you have broadband internet, it probably will be fine. Yeah? If you're using anything other than dial-up and you're hearing and all that, if you weren't doing that, then I think you'll be fine. And I think don't worry about that so much, because from your phone and the thing that Vodafone, EE, and all these people give you, that internet is sufficient. It will get you on Instagram. And what I'm trying to put here is a principle that don't overthink it. Don't let that thought stop you from doing something. because the thing in your hand is already doing Instagram, is already doing Facebook. And so if you've gone far enough to have that laptop, you're at home and you're ready to go live, then if your internet is at least broadband, I think you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And as time goes on, as the thing grows and more people come and all that, the church will grow, it will develop. And as it grows, you also invest back into the systems, new laptop, better internet. But I think the basics of what there is already in your hand, I think it will work.
Thank you. Looks like more questions are coming in. So it says, how do you monitor or manage who dials into your online event? That's the next question.
Yeah, security is a very important thing. As you may have heard, churches, organizations have experienced, on Zoom, for example, people crashing your events and things like that. So I think one key thing is to generally go with the principle to be secure. And to do that, you want to know who is on. If you came into church and one day, and physical church, and everybody had a hood on with a complete face mask and carrying black bags on their backs, would you be comfortable? You wouldn't really, because you can't see who's there, right? You don't know who's there. In a very simple sense, the same thing applies online. You want to know who you're with in that forum, even though they're not physically where you are, so they may not be able to harm you in that way physically, but at least they're in a forum together with you, and people can cause damage even in those kind of situations. So what am I saying? The same way we would want to know who is in the church. We're not you don't have to register at the door or pay or anything, but we just want to know who you are. So the minimum translation of that online is register, and if that deters people from coming, then you have to balance it to ensure that we're not overly structured and all that people don't want to come. But, essentially, I think registration is one of those tools that you can use to manage at least, what's going on. Yeah.
Thank you. So we have to rush because questions are just coming in. So the next question. Yeah, the next question is, as a user, is there a way to avoid buffering during a live service, or is that caused from the live feed?
It is caused from live feed and the speed of your internet. So basically, imagine a pipe between the person who's broadcasting and you at home, and you're pouring water down that pipe. The rate at which the water can come down the pipe is the rate at which is the size of the pipe at your end. So imagine a pipe has a big end. At their end, they pour a lot of water, but as the pipe gets to you, it gets narrower and narrower. Then the amount of water that can reach you is dependent on the size of the pipe at your end. If you increase the size of your end of the pipe, then more water can flow. But otherwise, the water will slow down. And that's essentially what's happening with buffering. If your internet is not strong enough to receive what's coming, it will start to buffer. And so a good answer to that is to really just improve internet speed. And relating that to the earlier question, if the person that was asking that earlier question starts to experience buffering, then that's the point you want to upgrade your internet maybe. So,
thank you. So the last question I've got here actually corresponds with the question I was going to ask to conclude. Like, where do you see the online church presence? So where do you see the online church presence post-lockdown? And just to say, because the church has evolved from a physical gathering to the air, like TV, radio broadcast. Now we are in the cloud, that's online presence. So where do you see us in the maybe far future, if we want to say, or is it just going to be from the cloud to heaven? Is this the last phase of what the church is going to experience?
The cloud to heaven. Okay, well, heaven is a journey that God calls us all when He's ready. And but remember, I talked about trends in technology. Those trends are already looking at the next level: artificial intelligence, machine learning. These are things that are reality now. So I think whatever those technologies offer us as a world, I think the church will leverage that. So I don't think that the cloud digital technologies of today are the end. Wherever technology goes, I think the church should be there too. That's one point. Beyond that, where do I think the church is going? I think the church has already changed. People say the church is changing, things are changing. No, it's not. I think COVID-19 was an opportunity really, for us to be, my people say, pulled by the ear. It's like they warned you. And I think for me, what I'm trying to say is that this whole lockdown situation is not, in history, I don't believe, the first time, nor is it the last, I believe, where churches may be restricted in doing what they do in the way they're used to. This restriction that we have at the moment is not because of anything malicious. It's because the government is trying to keep us safe. We're looking at making sure that public health is protected and so on and so forth. But there may be situations in other countries where people have been persecuted and they don't have the opportunity to gather as church, not because it's public health and all that, but because it's malicious, it's persecution. In either scenario, and I think it's important to realize that the church must be able to respond, must be able to adapt, must be able to move on and change as the times require it to. So I think it's crucial that we follow through, with being strategic, being, forward thinking. Churches need strategy, churches need planning, churches need future proofing, and so on. And I think, where do I think the church is going? I think we must, essentially adapt to Osaje. We must be conversant with what's going on. We cannot be insular. We cannot be, passive. We've really got to be on top of things and also get into the conversation, whether that be technologically, whether that be politically, whether that be socially. We need to get into the conversation, be involved in forming policy, forming, the new next technologies, make the non-profit religious sector a viable, important sector in many industries. So when people are designing products in their industries, they're thinking about this sector as well. I think that's important. And essentially, that puts the church as relevant, continually in the world. And of course, you cannot but pray, because ultimately what we do is spiritual, and it's done by, because of, and essentially through the Spirit of God. And we must keep that in mind, because ultimately we have a weapon that the world doesn't have. As the Bible says, greater is he who is in us than he who is in the world. And I think that's essential for being able to wield power as the Church of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you in our discussion today, Pastor Ayobami. We are very delighted. We just want to say thank you. And for our listeners out there, we want to say thank you for staying tuned and always tuning in to join our programs. We really, really do appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining. Please, if you have any questions, you'd see the information on the scroll button just below the screen. If you want to contact Pastor Ayobami for any questions, you can always contact him. His contact details there as well. Thank you very much for joining us. And yeah, we'll see you during our next program on Saturday. Thank you.